Manual for the Human Mind. All right, Esselman. The thing is, I'm replying to comments in some of the previous videos in this series here. The thing is, everybody admits that we have to use will, even though it's an illusion, some of us say. So, fine, I'm pulling the thing you pull aware. Okay, physics is deterministic, whatever. At that level, at our level, it doesn't seem deterministic, so it requires a different set of abstractions. Now, he said, I'm going to have some graphics here. He said that in this kind of thing, that okay, this is the ovals are states. There's your current state, and there's desired, unknown, and negative states out there. The reddish lines are your desires, and the green line is an action you take. It won't be exactly in the direction of the desire, but that's the idea. You want to align your ability to act on your desires so that, for example, if you see a beautiful woman, you don't act on that in such a way that turns her off by coming on too strong or whatever. So you have to align those. Okay, and he's saying, oh, wait, the desires you have are part of that state as well. Well, yes, so they may be. Conceptually, uh, they are. But our subjective experience is of being able to relate and process desires. Now, because, for example, in a physical space, if an object has multiple forces, which are like the desires working on it, then it goes in a summation. There's a one net force, and that is the force, and it predictably goes in that direction. And I submit that with humans, this is not the experience, right? Um, if we were mechanistic like that, if I had a desire to paint a blue painting, but I also had a competing desire to paint a red painting, I'd end up painting a purple painting. Okay, but in our case, we might do that, or we might just ignore one or the other of the desires. We can filter and damp down desires. Now, you could say all you want, oh, that's just an illusion. In this argument, I'm not saying it's not an illusion. I'm just saying, how does it work? I would like to know how the illusion works, whatever it is, if it turns out to be an illusion. Okay, now this situation, this drawing, you have immediate desires and states that are very nearby. But the bigger picture is this. We are among desires that stretch way, way out around us, right? Things that are days and days and months away. Now, here, the way I've drawn this, you can see there's a big desire down here in what will that be? I guess the lower right. And to get to it, you're going to have to go through what you can anticipate, or what will really be, negative and unknown states. But I've drawn a really big desire. You can see I've drawn, if we get close, a really big desire vector that goes right through a negative state here, and that wants to get to this really big uh, desired state down here. And this is more the real situation. Furthermore, this space in between isn't empty along these vectors. There's states all along there. So we're trying to measure this. And in fact, I just did the rest of the states more or less at random, except for that I made this cloud of unknown and negatives of states between, your state and the really big desired state. Other than that, I just sort of speckled them in random. Now, though, you notice there's a lot more unknown and negative states than desired states. But even doing that, you can see there's paths, according to this, from, you know, through some positive states that, though they still would have to link through a negative state to get down to the big desired state, um, you could possibly have a lot less of them, but maybe it would take longer. Okay. Um, So this is kind of the idea, stepping from one to the other. Of course, this is also our conceptual space of how we imagine the world. It's not whether, we have a desired state that we think is positive. We could get there and it turns out in reality it's negative. So these are really desired and undesired, but I put desired and negative to munge it all together for now. In reality, you have to have desired and undesired, and you have a different space of negative or positive, and in fact you have negative and positive on every possible criteria of negative or positive. whether it takes long is negative. Now, I'd say that because of the multidimensional nature of this and the way we bring things together, see, a living thing, a non-living thing, when it brings the forces impeding on it together, it rolls downhill in one direction. If it's swerving back and forth, it's because the direction of downhill is changing at its current location, and therefore it makes a change. But we don't experience it that way. We can go uphill. Our desires can be combined in such a way that we can overcome a lot of the forces of nature that make these things always some. And especially with humans, you cannot tell me that you have to do your desire. We know one thing, that people turn off desires, like in the Victorian era, you turn off your desires, for example, your sexual desires, they build up, and eventually they get expressed as different kinds of desires, dysfunctionally. But you can definitely ignore your desires in the time being. Yeah, there's an effect, but it's a cause and effect that you work with. You can choose to ignore the desire, or you can choose to embrace it, or you could choose some in between, how to turn what a desire you think is unhealthy, how to make some healthy work with the part that just impels itself upon you. And you can juggle and manage these things. Okay. So the desires are like forces, but really they're more like batteries, and you can turn them on and off to a certain degree. But they're hooked into the circuitry. They could overload, and you could have a surge that jumps the switch that's trying to turn off that power. Or you can leave it off too long, and it overcharges and causes destruction that way. But you do have some influence subjectively. You have some influence on how these things are combined. You can make one desire bigger or less. How do you do that? Well, it's not magic. I mean, it's pretty simple. If you have a couple different desires, the more you imagine one and don't think about the other, the more you'll tend to do it. The more you picture it, both because of how the human body is motivated, but also because the more you visualize, the more realistic that visualization becomes, until finally it's like, wow, I just have to get up and make this phone call, do this, and I'll be in school. And then I just go to school for a couple years and I'll have the degree I wanted. At one point when you visualize something, suddenly something complicated and too abstract, becomes easier. I mean, you might start visualizing after you have the degree and working, but if you never get to the point where you visualize the doing the school part, then it's just a fantasy, and you'll never get there because you want to already have it. You want an impossible version. But for realistic ideas, it starts to all fall out from the fantasy part, flows back into what you do, and suddenly it motivates you to do something, to go through an unknown or even negative state, because you know that it's getting you on a trip to something that cumulatively will be a more positive state for you. So yeah, the main issue is, so what? And Gary, last night we had a good conversation on this. It's like, whether you're compatibilist or whatever or not, we have to live like there's free will. So we might as well know how it works, and eventually that's how we'll understand why it's an illusion and whatnot. But meanwhile, we can figure out how to motivate ourselves to make the changes in the world and ourselves that we already desire. Now, with all these graphics, I have to do some stuff.